Hello and welcome to the Summer Schoolin' YouTube channel. I'm Nico and thanks for joining me today. If you haven't already, give me a like or subscribe to the channel. I bring content weekly talking about the things I'm seeing in education, my thoughts on being a teacher, what it took to be a teacher, and maybe I'll talk about things that have nothing to do with school. So, again, thanks for coming by. For today, I got a doozy for you. This video is for people who are considering pursuing becoming a teacher. If you want to become a teacher and go through the hoops, basically, if you want to go through the hoops to becoming a teacher and getting your teaching credential, this video is for you. So, without further ado, let's talk about it. First of all, salute to you if you are taking this on seriously as something you want to pursue. I left the field, but that doesn't mean that I devalue people who choose to stay in it. I think highly of them. I think normally of them. Anyone who wants to hold down a job, props to you. And just live a responsible life. Nothing but Godspeed. You know what I'm saying? So, I want to make this video for those considering this field, and I want to give them what I wish I had gotten prior to enrolling in the teaching credentialing program. So right off the bat, I am only talking about my experience and the path I chose. There's many paths to becoming a teacher. I'm in the state of California, so the hoops that I had to jump through are not necessarily going to translate if you're in a different state. Take that into consideration. I will just talk about the path I walked and what I saw along the way. So, right off the bat, I'm going to start with this book, Thomas Sowell, Inside American Education. I will say this immediately. Bringing up Thomas Sowell is you're probably already having judgments about me. I totally understand. Here's another person that brings up Thomas Sowell and will just use it as dogma that needs to be followed. And look, I completely agree with you. I do not like it when people present Thomas Sowell's work. Same thing with Jordan Peterson, honestly, where they present their work as like the Bible, as in this is well thought out and everything's thought out for you. This is exactly how you have to think. No. And full disclosure, I happily have a huge collection of Thomas Sowell's books, and I've also given the money happily to Jordan Peterson's buying his books as well. But I think both of them would agree that they want their readers to just find pleasure in engaging their material and their ideas. You don't have to completely agree with them. You don't have to be able to cite their books to your political opponents. They just want you to consider these things and take it as information to feed into your own personal philosophies and beliefs. Individual agency, at least in the way you think. You don't have to read a book and then defend the author at all costs. No. So let me just say that. But I'm going to continue with this book, Thomas Sowell, Inside American Education. This was written in 1992, I believe, 1991. And I didn't read this book until a year and a half after I graduated from teaching college in about 2020. I graduated I graduated from teaching college the winter before the lockdowns in March of 2020. So no, 2019. Sorry. And I wish I read this book, and I'm going to read it just a little bit to you. I advise if you're wanting to become a teacher, if you are a teacher or you left the field and you want kind of a brutally honest and thoughtful analysis of school as an institution, public education as an institution, this is a good book to start with. Now, I'm going to read this as context to teaching schools and the colleges of education. So he talks about how public education is incentivized to keep the monopoly alive. We want public schools to be the school that everyone goes to. We don't want people going to charters. We don't want people going to private schools or home schools. Just us at all costs. And he talks about this fear of competition, and he says, it is very solidly based on the low levels of substantive intellectual ability among public school teachers and administrators and among the professors of education who taught them. That's where this fear of competition is coming from. And he talks about different colleges, prestigious colleges, and their view of their college of education on their campuses. Consistently for decades, those college students who have qualified or who have majored in education have been among the least qualified of all college students, and the professors who taught them have been among the least respected by their colleagues elsewhere in the college or university. The word contempt appears repeatedly in discussions of the way academic students and professors view their counterparts in the field of education. At Columbia Teacher College, 120th Street is said to be, quote, the wildest street in the world, end quote, because it separates that institution from the rest of Columbia University. Nor is Columbia at all unique in this respect. Quote, in many universities, end quote, according to a study by Martin Mayer, quotes, there is little, if any, contact between the members of the Department of Education and the members of other departments in the school, end quote. When the president of Harvard University retired in 1933, he told the institution's overseers that Harvard Graduate School of Education was a, quote, kitten that ought to be drowned, end quote. More recently, a knowledgeable academic declared, quote, the educationists have set the lowest possible standards and required the least amount of hard work, end quote. Education schools and education departments have been called, quote, the intellectual slums of the university. Bear with me. I'm just going to read 2 more sections. This is brutal. And the next thing that I read, I can feel this jerk. Despite some attempts to depict such attitudes as mere snobbery, hard data on education student qualifications have consistently shown their mental test scores to be at or near the bottom among all categories of students. This was as true of studies done in the 1920s and 1930s as of studies in the 1980s. As an aside, I would be curious on where that stands now, because as hard as that is to read, I'm not going to act like I was I was academically achieving monstrous scores on my SATs prior to going and enrolling in my undergrad at Marquette. I'm pretty sure I just got in for affirmative action. I can't clarify that because I had like a 3.4, 3.5 GPA. So that's hard to read, but I'm not that guy who can defend high ACT or SAT scores. I'll continue. Students majoring in education have consistently scored below the national average. I'm going to end with this quote right here. Given low-quality students and low-quality professors, it can hardly be surprising to discover, as Mayer did, that, quote, most education courses are not intellectually respectable because their teachers and the textbooks are not intellectually respectable, end quote. In short, some of the least qualified students taught by the least qualified professors in the lowest quality courses supply most American public school teachers. There are severe limits to how intellectual their teaching could be, even if they wanted it to be. Their susceptibility to fads, and especially to non-intellectual and anti-intellectual fads, is understandable. Okay, so I read that because, I was kind of seeing, not exactly I wasn't sitting in teacher school being like, man, everyone here is dumb except for me. I was sitting there like, the material that's being brought to me for a master's degree and just the way the class is structured around this material, I don't really need to think. Like this doesn't really require me to think. And here's where I get into how classes are like at Teacher College. So classes at the College of Education, they're dry and unengaging. I will tell you, I love taking notes. I had my notebook and my pencil ready to go, and on the first day, I didn't really have to take that much notes. I was realizing a lot of this is common sense. Like, for example, I don't need to take notes on why it's not good to shame a kid in class. I think that's common sense. You know what would have been a better alternative for just that example of a talking point in class? To have a discussion about, is there value in shaming? Not like corporal punishments, but what if you never shame a child, how can they register that they've done something wrong? If you have to shame them, is there a productive way to go about it? That type of conversation never will happen in a classroom. Everything that's given to you, okay, not everything. I'd say 85% of what's given to you is really immediately framed based on the professor's viewpoints of the world. I sat in classes, and let me just say this right off the bat, curious, this is the list of the classes that I had to take over my I went to a program where I went to a program at San Jose State University for 3 semesters, and it was 3 semesters, a year and a half, for a master's degree with a teaching credential. So when you're choosing programs and the best way you want to get to that teaching credential, if you want to get a degree with it, that's something to consider. If you don't and you just want to go straight to your teaching credential, that's a respectable path as well. You got to figure that out on your own. I went with a master's and a teaching credential because I wanted my money's worth, basically. But the types of classes that I went to were math curriculum, health and special ed teaching, educational sociology, educational psychology, and language and literature development. So those are the types of classes that you will take, and you hear those and you're like, oh, that sounds pretty relevant to teaching. And yeah, to a certain extent they are, but the learning environment in these classes, again, dry and unengaging. Mostly it's just professors giving you their PowerPoints, and their PowerPoints, again, have their ideology kind of subtly woven into what they present. And as a result, the classes are very sanitized. You're not going to have debates or hearty discussions over the value of certain ideas, the practicality of certain ideas. It's more so, we know the response that the professor is looking for. Let's say it to them, and then that way school or the classes will go by and we'll be able to go home. And I gotta say that environment contributes to what I call the good student problem. And I came up with this phrase just because it's a dynamic that's created in any classroom, and in the teacher schools, this environment where the professor is pretty much giving their views of the world and presenting it as facts to their class. It creates a good student problem, where a good student is the student that responds exactly with what the professor is looking for, never challenges the professor's thinking, never asks questions that inconvenience their own individual thoughts, and just sets about to please the teacher by all means. And hey, you find success that way because that's a great way to get an A. But for me, that's not learning. And what you'll see because of this sanitized and dry and unengaging classroom, what you'll see is a lot of just jadedness. Like, people come to these classes and they're on their Amazon shopping list. I'm not going to judge them. I did it occasionally too. They're checking out sports scores, looking up other stuff. And I don't blame them, because there's no real chewing the fat of what we're doing in these walls, within these institutional walls. There's none of that. And a lot of the assignments, this moves into work. The work that you're going to have a lot of the work is just largely irrelevant and time consuming. I guess that's one argument that can be made for teaching schools, is that they do prepare you. They prepare you for the bombardment of paperwork that is going to come your way when you actually become a teacher. Because the questions that are asked are not thought-provoking. You can answer them in a drunken stupor if you could, and if you wanted to. And if they aren't questions, they ask for a reflection, but it's not really your individual thoughts on what this experience was and what you can do about it. It's more about just reporting facts. You'll see a lot of give 3 responses to this, and they'll tell you the types of responses they are looking for. A lot of the assignments are so heavily loaded with, you can tell exactly what the professor only wants to see based on how their instructions are laid out, or the goal of the assignment. It's gonna be the challenge in the workload of teacher school is in your patience, because boy, they are going to test your patience. None of the work is difficult. None of it is difficult. It's the volume of just wasteful activity. And let me tell you, I'll give you an example. So when you go into your student teaching, and that's where they really hike up the volume of pointless work that you have to do, on top of the fun part, which is being in the field and teaching kids. For example, you have to record, occasionally you're going to have to record yourself giving a lesson to the class. You have to come up with a lesson plan, type it up exactly how they want, type up your lesson plan, then record the video, submit it to the kind of network. We used Canvas for our class, and an assignment would be like, go and watch 3 videos and give the following response. What is something you like? What is something that you noticed? What is something you would suggest to your classmate on how they can improve their lesson moving forward? Things like that. Like, I didn't care what comments were left on my videos. My classmates don't care. I don't even remember what they wrote, but we had to do that kind of stuff. Why? Because it's very clear that they don't want to know what you actually think about what's going on in the school. They just want to have a paper trail that you were in a school and you were talking about teaching. And it's a shame, because I feel like colleges of education could be really fun if they got away from all the politics. And I'm in California, so it is heavy in your face with, hey, welcome, we're here to talk about these kind of political views. And a lot of the classes will consist of just a lot of finger pointing. And I read that book at the start because you're not going to get that kind of honesty on public schools while you're learning to become a public school teacher. That it just isn't going to happen. You're going to see a lot of finger pointing to racism, charter schools, the patriarchy, misogyny, as reasons why public schools don't succeed. You're going to hear a lot of grandstanding from professors in terms of, we need to get these kids to recognize the hatred that's in the world and train them to not be like that. It's just this weird superhero complex. That being said, I still do have one good thing to say about if you're going to teaching schools. If you're going to go and become a teacher and go through this process, I can say from my experience, despite all of these things and having disagreements with my teachers and not feeling like I got my money's worth during class time, there were professors that really, really opened their door to me, literally for their office hours. I live 45 minutes away from campus, and there were times where I would drive up just to talk to a teacher during their office hours. There was no classes. I didn't have to do that, but I wanted to, because if you are going to become a teacher, you say a lot about how you were going to be as a teacher, by how you are as a student. And my big suggestion to new teachers is, you want to be a teacher? Fine. You better be a good student. And not in the good student definition that I gave, but you need to hold your professors accountable for what they say. Hold yourself accountable. If you say something and you get caught, not caught, but if you find a hole in your own thinking, own it. And then that's the fun part, because I've had back and forth with these professors in these programs where I was like, I never considered that. Or that's an interesting take. It's not, when you talk to your professors, find the professors that really speak to you. But when you find them, let them know that you appreciate their time by getting to know them and getting to know their experience in the field too. And let them know that, yes, you may disagree with them, you may find flaws in the way they teach their class, but it's all in good faith, and you also appreciate that they do take the time to talk to you outside of class. And if they don't, then they're not a good professor. They're not a good professor. I would say the majority of the professors that I had, where their classes were heavily framed with politics in mind, I still like those people. And I'm making this channel because I see what they're doing as problematic or misguided. I'm going to say that. Not problematic. I see what they're doing as misguided. And hopefully at one time I can have a conversation with one of my professors here on the channel. That'd be great. But last suggestion, take it upon yourself, aspiring teachers, to scratch that itch of curiosity that you're not getting in classes outside of class. I remember always having a book on me. I was reading Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man. During this whole time, I was reading all Shelby Steele books. I was listening to Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter, Coleman Hughes. Any kind of ideas that I couldn't fully engage in because the classroom was there were so many boundaries wrapped around the thinking in the classroom, which is a shame. That shouldn't be happening. But what I wasn't getting in the class, you have to take ownership outside of the class. Yes, you're not getting it there. Get your money's worth out elsewhere, because that's where you're actually going to grow. Don't just go to the class, say what the teacher wants, then go home and watch Netflix. That's not growing up. That's not getting you ready for the field you are about to enter. If you're really serious about being a teacher, be serious about being a student. Be serious about your own personal learning. And embrace your curiosity. Never shame it. Never shame it. Your intellectual curiosity should always be nurtured. And that's what I have to say. So, salute to you, anyone who is serious about becoming a teacher. I left the field. I don't knock anyone who's still in it. I think it's a respectable position to honor. And I wish you the best. Hopefully, again, you enjoyed this video. I'm going to cut it short right here. Like, subscribe, and I'll come back with a weekly video next time. So take care, relax, enjoy your summer. Bye.